Hi, Bill Burnett here. By the way, Calgary in the background today. In the last video, I talked about the peak end question and that it's the most important thing for you to do in the job interview. It's also the very last thing you do in the job interview. Before you get to that question, I'm going to give you a second question to ask. This question is designed around achieving that other key goal in the job interview, which is to have the hiring manager believe that you're the right person for the job at a cognitive level around skills and abilities and competencies and so on. Now, what we do in this particular case is we're going to leverage some insights that come out of psychology as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about those because they help to frame this question and make it easier for you to ask. It's called the bonus question in the book. And the reason that it's called the bonus question is because the book is really about peak questions. And the bonus question is not a peak question. It's a question of a different form. And the form is called a counterfactual hypothetical. Now, what's the background for counterfactual hypotheticals? It comes out of psychology, of course. And the experiments that were done that demonstrated the effectiveness of this question, there were lots of them, but probably the most well-known one is one where they had participants. Now, in most psychological studies, the participants are college students because psychologists who are doing research mostly are affiliated with a university. So these were lots of college students, and they participated in a different study around nutrition. And these scientists sort of jumped on this bandwagon and married their experiment to this experiment or this survey around nutrition. They had the students come into a classroom and they would say, listen, we're going to take you into this other room. We're going to ask you a set of survey questions, probably take close to an hour to do. They're not quite ready for us, so we're going to sit here for a moment. That's what both groups got. That's all that the control group got. The test group got this further conversation. Said, listen, imagine that you had read in notable scientific journals that it turns out that cakes and pastries, etc., aren't nearly as bad for us as we've always thought, and in fact, they may have some major health benefits. If this were true, how might it change your eating of cakes and pastries? And we want you to take notes because we're going to ask you to justify your response later on. Right? They worked on that. Then they went into the room and they took this hour-long survey around nutrition. And then they were instructed to go down to a debrief room, and on their way they could pick a snack. And there were two choices. One was a beautiful bowl of freshly cut fruit salad, and the other was a multi-layer chocolate cake with whipped cream and cherry on top. Well, the control group, now both groups had gone through the same survey, which was focused on nutrition, so the awareness of nutrition was certainly heightened for these college students. And in the control group, the ones who didn't get this hypothetical question about the health benefits of cakes and pastries, 25% of them chose the cake, but 75% chose the fruit salad. In the test group, the ones that got the question about the health benefits of cakes and pastries, nearly 70% of them took the cake. They repeated this experiment many times because they were doing it in fairly small groups. In all, they did over 400 students got this counterfactual hypothetical question around cakes and pastries being good for you. One of the questions that they asked them in the debrief room, if they had chosen cake, was, we talked about the nutritional value of cakes and pastries before you went in to take the survey on nutrition. Did you think that it was true that cakes and pastries have major health benefits? And every single student said, no, I knew it wasn't true. It was just a what if, right? Yet it caused them to choose to eat cake in a large majority of these. This kind of question, it turns out, has two big modulators, and they did a number of experiments. They actually tagged on to this experiment later on and repeated it to find out what modulated the effectiveness of the behavior of choosing cake. And they found two things. One was how relevant the question was to the person answering it, and two, how much elaboration they had to engage in answering it. In some cases, they didn't have to elaborate at all. They weren't asked to write anything down. In other cases, they were asked to completely justify their choice. For the relevancy, they changed it from major health benefits to minor health benefits, making it a little less relevant. And they found that it did have some impact on how many people responded to the question as predicted. So we're going to use this. It's called a counterfactual hypothetical, which is a mouthful, but it's a counterfactual hypothetical question, very powerful in the job interview, and here it is. Imagine you hired me. It's now a year later. I've had an outstanding first year. What have I accomplished? Or what have I done? Now, you can expand this question when you ask it because you want to make it your own question. You can say, if you know, for example, that one of the important competencies is leadership, you might have told a story about leadership, and you might embellish this question by saying, for example, what will I be called upon to do from a leadership perspective? What would I have done? What would I have done in terms of being a great team member on a team? What would I have done in terms of problem solving, right? And you can ask them to expand on it. The trick here is you've got to make them answer the question about you, not some ideal great candidate. That has no power for you. They've got to be talking about you. And if they're talking about you, then they're going to, at their subconscious mind, attribute to you at least the capability to deliver this level of outstanding performance. All right? Now, what you really want to do is make sure that you cover competencies because they already know your skills and your education, and your experience, and your work history. It comes off your resume. During the course of the interview, you want to cover the key competencies for this role. And in another video, I'll talk about how you discover those key competencies. But for now, we know from the literature that the most important competencies are things like leadership, teamwork, communication skills, problem solving, innovation, and the like. You can Google this, what are the most important competencies in a new hire, and you'll get a list of your own. And what you want to do is pick the top 3 or 4 and make sure you've got a story in answer to an interview question that you can tell that reveals, for example, that you had the opportunity to be a great leader and you were, or you had the opportunity to participate in a team and you were a great team member because you did such and such, right? You had this very difficult problem to solve and you solved it in an interesting way, right? Good problem solving skills. You want to tell those stories because those stories become the narrative elements that the hiring manager can pull in when answering that counterfactual hypothetical bonus question. So I encourage you to do that. So I'll cover more of this around competencies, around other counterfactual hypothetical questions that we ask in the peak interview in other videos. I do encourage you, of course, to get the book, right? And you can get it on Amazon. I do say you can get it used, even though I get no benefit from that. But you're in transition, so you want to make sure that you spend your money wisely. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.